guys, this is one more whisper. I have noticed, as I'm sure many of you have, that a lot of whisperers or ASM artists have problems with either depression or anxiety or something along those lines. And I'm also one of those whisperers. I've suffered with anxiety mainly for a few years now, and I find it interesting almost that so many members of our community suffer from similar things. I think in a way it's nice that we can perhaps support each other sometimes or hear other people's experiences, and because of that, what I wanted to do in this video is go over a few things that help me to deal with my anxiety, and perhaps some of these tips will be useful to other sufferers out there. Now, a bit of a disclaimer at the start. I'm not a professional psychologist or doctor or specialist in any way, but as I say, I have suffered anxiety for many years, so these are just things that helped me deal with it, and if they help you, then that's great, but again, it's not medical advice because I'm not a professional, so take this with a pinch of salt. So, the number one, these aren't in any order, but number one on my list of things I do to help me beat my anxiety is to keep my mind distracted. I always find that I feel much worse when I am doing nothing and I'm by myself. So what I try and do as much as I can is to focus on something or to be around people, and I find that what that does, it just gives my mind a little something to keep it distracted almost from the anxious thoughts. Obviously, the thoughts and the anxiety is still there, but what I find is that by engaging your mind in something different, it can just take the edge off for a while, and I think the important thing is to stick with it. I find if I'm feeling a little anxious, or a lot anxious, and I start doing something, it can take up to half an hour before I start to feel the effects of that distraction. But I would say that is perhaps the most effective thing to do for me when I feel anxious. So by distractions, that can be anything. I like to watch TV shows or films. I find that a good way of keeping my mind occupied. Recently I started watching, or continued watching, because I started it quite a while ago, the One Piece anime series, which I really enjoy, and there's been some days when I've felt really bad, and by watching an episode, or a series of episodes that just starts to make me feel a little easier. It just gives me something to do to stop the anxious train of thought that occurs. And there's obviously other things you can do. Exercise is quite a good one, because that naturally helps with anxiety. I go on a lot of walks. I try and do at least one walk a day, and I'm trying to go more to the gym, because not only is it a distraction, but it also apparently releases chemicals in your brain that make you feel better. So, but really, I think the key thing is to make sure you're as busy as you can be. So number 2, I would say, is to keep a regular diet. When I've been in my worst places, I often completely lose my appetite, and I'm sure many sufferers of depression and anxiety can relate to this. You just don't feel like eating. And what I've found the first time I suffered is that I didn't eat, and I lost a lot of weight, and this actually in turn made me more ill physically, and because I was ill, that made me more anxious. So by not eating, I actually made myself a lot worse. Through that, I learned that despite how I feel in my head, it's important and necessary to have my 3 meals a day. I do tend to stop snacking when I'm suffering from anxiety, which is a plus point, I suppose. But like I say, even if it's a bit of a struggle to eat, I really do try and get the 3 meals in, and I do feel better for it. It's important that if your mental health is suffering, not to let that affect your physical health if you can, and maintaining a regular intake of food certainly helps me do that, and that's something I learned through experience. Number 3 is to let your feelings out one way or another, and the main way I like to do this is by talking. I'm lucky enough to have a very supportive family who know all about my problems, and they are always willing to listen. And I find that most of the time that really helps. People say a problem shared is a problem halved, and while I wouldn't quite say halved, I always feel at least a little sense of relief when I've got a worry off my chest, or even if I'm not worrying about anything specific and I'm just feeling awful, just by going up to someone that I trust and who I know won't judge me and saying, I feel terrible today. I find that useful. And another way that I get my feelings out And a way that you can do it if you perhaps don't have anyone you can talk to is I keep like a journal. I guess journal is a more manly way of saying diary. But no, it's something I do when I'm struggling, going through a tough period. Just at the end of each day, writing down how my day went, both in terms of what I did and in how anxious or depressed I felt. And I find that this really helps make sense of what you've been through and just takes some of the pressure off your mind. It stops things getting clogged up a little bit for me, just writing it down. And what I also like to do in this journal is keep, every day I keep a track of 3 things I've done that I'm happy about or proud of, just as like a little self-esteem booster. So yeah, I find that useful. So number 4 is perhaps a slightly controversial one, but important, I think, is that don't be afraid to get medical or professional help. Through doing some research on anxiety online, I've found that there's a lot of people who are anti-medication when it comes to depression and anxiety, and I don't agree with that stance at all. I'm sure that isn't the right option for everyone, but I'm on medication for my anxiety, and I'm glad I am, because it does help. And I think, in the UK, we have the NHS who, sometimes they're not great, sometimes they are. But I'm happy with how my anxiety is dealt with by them, and I sort of trust them enough to be responsible about the medication I take. And I don't understand the stigma that some people seem to put on antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication, because when you're in that horrible frame of mind, you would just, this is how I feel, but I just feel like I would do anything to get out of it. And if that means taking a pill once a day, great. You wouldn't, most people wouldn't treat mental health problems different to physical health problems. There's a lot of people who are quite happy to take antibiotics and painkillers, but who look down upon antidepressants, and I think that's just wrong. So I would say, don't be afraid to go down that path if that is an option. And but always go with doctor's advice. That's crucial. And the other side of that is, I would say, don't be afraid or ashamed of, seeing a counsellor or a psychologist or something if you feel you need to. I know it's a step that is quite hard to take, and initially it can be demoralising, but it's really quite a normal thing to do. And after speaking to people when I was surprised how many people do it, and it's become quite a normal thing now with stresses of everyday life and things like that. I really think there isn't anyone in the world who wouldn't benefit at least somewhat from seeing someone like that, because everyone's got problems and issues. So I guess that's the point. Really, don't be afraid to go down either of those routes if you're feeling terrible and you don't know what to do. Don't suffer just because you don't want to get help. So I think I've covered most things really. I would say for point or tip 5 is if you're anxious about specific things, and these things are normal things, doable things, I would say, always try and do them if you can, face your anxieties if possible, even if it's just really small steps at a time. And the reason I say this is because when things have been really bad for me, I've been anxious about, going out sort of anywhere. And, for a while I gave in to that anxiety and I stayed indoors and did nothing. And, well, that just made things 10 times worse because I was depressed about not being able to do stuff. And, whether I'd lose friends and things like that. And in the end I got so down about not going out that I decided to face my anxieties and just do it, because I came to the conclusion that I couldn't feel much worse than I did. And once I sort of realised that, and once I started to force myself, and it really was like forcing myself to go out, I actually started to feel better, because again it comes into the thing of distracting your mind. Going out is something to do, something that takes your mind off anxiety. And the truth is, most of the time, if not all of the time, it actually goes well, despite all your fears and what you're scared of, whatever that may be. And most of the time anxiety is unfounded when you've got an anxiety disorder. And once you come out of that problem, or that situation where you think there's going to be a problem, once you come out the other side and you're fine, you do get a sense of achievement. And I think that's an important thing to get when you're struggling with these things. It's a step in the right direction. And, like I say, they can be the smallest of steps. And you don't always have to, go one further each time either. If you're comfortable just, going a certain way towards facing your fear, stay there for a while, and then, you can make the progress when you're ready. But I think the important thing is to, not give in every time to your anxiety. As easy as it is to do, and as tempting as it is to do, and in a way as natural as it feels, it just made me feel so much worse in the long run, because I was giving into it, and because I knew I was giving into it. And now when I'm anxious, I really try and focus on facing those. But you know, there's still a lot of stuff that I don't do that I would like to do, but I don't because of my anxiety. I don't go to like London shows or things like that because I don't like the fact that I'm like trapped. I feel kind of trapped in theatres and stuff. Like I can't just walk out if I wanted to. I'm sort of okay with the cinema because that's not such a big deal if you sort of need to go out and take a minute. But yeah, I really enjoy musicals and shows, and I miss that side of things, and that's something, you know, I don't really feel ready to do yet. But you know, I force myself to do other things that I find anxious, and you know, as long as I'm not just staying at home ignoring the world, that's okay for me. Okay, so I think I'm probably going to end this there. There's 5 topics of discussion that I believe help me with my anxiety. Perhaps they will help you. I wish anyone out there with anxiety problems or depression, I wish you the best of luck in dealing with that. And I'd like to say that I know how you feel, because you do feel terribly alone in those times. And if anyone wants to send a message or leave a comment about your experiences with this type of thing, feel free to. But that's it for now, so